Did you know that all experiences in your life are for you? Welcome to Soul Musings, exploring and embracing higher perspectives with me, Dr. Connie. Discover how every experience is an opportunity for spiritual expansion when we observe and use them from the higher perspective of our soul. Explore how we can create more alignment in our lives by focusing on the essence of the experience we want, rather than the form. Learn about ways of living and working together that can build a more harmonious and cooperative world. In each episode, we share awarenesses and tools that you can use in your own soul's journey to create more love, peace, and joy. Soul Musings starts now. So welcome everyone to Soul Musings, exploring and embracing higher perspectives. So glad you're joining us, and we have a great show today. We're going to start, as I like to start everything, with just a quick centering process. So as you're taking a deep breath, maybe put your hand on your heart, maybe close your eyes. Just see a brilliant white light or golden light coming from the highest place you can imagine, down through the top of your head, through all the levels of your consciousness, every place in your body, energizing every cell, every organ, everything that is part of your physical with this brilliant light. And in that process, just center in that joyful, loving, peaceful place that is your divine essence or soul. Pushing out anything that is no longer needed, anything that's of the negative nature. And then as you breathe in again, just fill it with more of that loving light, peace, and joy. And then in your perfect timing, just come present with us. So today we're going to look at a higher perspective on aging. And to me, this is really important because especially in Western cultures, there's almost an obsession with aging. I mean, all of you just think about, when you think of the idea of aging, getting older, what do you think of? I imagine a lot of people think of, degenerating, getting less energetic, not having as full of a life. But what if actually, from a higher perspective, as we age, we can actually improve the quality of our life, improve that sense of who we are as a divine being, and live in a much more positive, energetic, increasingly so. It's not about whether we're trying to keep vital, that's not the issue. It's just that there's almost an industry and making sure your body looks like it was when it was young. You don't have any wrinkles. I mean, how many products are there to try to fight the fact that we're actually, our bodies are getting older? And there's a little bit more leeway in the Eastern cultures where there is more respect for that maturity, for that experience, for that wisdom that can come forward through a lifetime. And what I decided to do for this episode is to bring on a friend of mine who is Reverend Dr. Angela Bell, who is joining us, because we share a kind of similar philosophy about this. And Angela can speak a lot from her own experience. She's going to be 95 in January. I think that's right. Is that right, Angela?
That's right. That's
correct. And so, one of the things I used to send out as a birthday card, and I've done it to Angela and people of all ages, is a greeting that says, with God, the rest of your life can be the best of your life. And imagine living with that joyful, optimistic anticipation and the higher perspective or viewing point that we can take for that to be true for all of us, for any of us. And that, in my experience of knowing Angela, that is something that she embraces and lives. But I'll let you talk about that yourself, Angela. How do you see your life has become increasingly better as you've aged? How do you see that?
Well, first of all, I'm much lighter in my spirit much lighter. I'm more peaceful.
Hmm.
My attitude is blessed. I am blessed with everything that I do, everything that I see. So I have an attitude of getting blessings all the time.
Hmm. And then if you have that attitude, you do receive them, right? If we're not
And I do receive them, and
right.
I receive them sometimes in the most miraculous way.
Hmm. And can you think of a time where you can use that as an
Yeah,
example?
well, I was thinking of this morning,
Uh-huh.
and I have to relate to a service that I did for 20 years going into the prisons.
Okay.
And one
As
of the,
as a volunteer, correct?
yes, as a volunteer,
Okay.
not confused, as a volunteer. And one of the very first workshops that I did in the prison was in a maximum security prison. And
Hmm.
I did my first trio with the head honcho of the yard.
Okay. So the trio
Oh,
being the workshop where people get together in small groups and
oh,
talk to each other.
yeah, okay. And that was the first, and she was never supposed to be paroled.
Mm.
Well, guess what? This morning, I got a telephone call from her,
Uh-huh.
paroled and working at Homeboys in LA.
How wonderful.
A miracle. I mean, I have lived long enough
Right.
to see a miracle, to experience a miracle.
Hmm. Yeah, I've had
And
those.
that's what my life is like now.
Hmm.
As long as I have that attitude,
Right.
an attitude of accepting everything the way it is,
Wow.
the way it is.
Hmm.
Not right, not wrong,
Hmm.
not good, not bad, but it is what it is.
I
And
think
then
you have a rap about that, don't you? I know Angela has kind of a rapper, but I think I've heard you rap about that one time.
yeah, well, that's my fun time. My
Right.
my fun time. And sometimes I get a rap
Mm,
spiritual rap with with spiritual words,
got it.
you know.
Which kind of brings us to the whole byline of this show. The whole intention of this show is looking at things, exploring things from a higher perspective, and then finding things we want to embrace and practice and do.
Yeah.
So, when did you in your life? What's the most significant time where you either started exploring a higher perspective or really embrace that higher perspective that actually you are a soul here for a reason, learning growth, spiritual expansion, rather than just a human body living a life on this level?
Well, I think it was probably when I was about 40.
Okay.
I had a near death experience. I had cancer, like a really bad case of cancer.
Wow.
And I was getting like visions, and I was half here and half someplace else.
Hmm.
And all I wanted was to go home to God. I had that constantly gnawing at me every day. So I was looking for a spiritual teacher,
Okay.
and I found one. I
Hmm.
I found John Roger,
Okay.
and I began, and my my disease went into remission. I had no treatment. It
No
didn't,
treatment at all.
no,
Wow.
nothing. I didn't have
No.
radiation, chemotherapy. I didn't have any of that. I just, because I was really near death.
Right.
And that disease just went into remission. And so I stayed with that teacher,
I can see why.
and I'm still with that teaching.
Hmm.
And I became a minister with this church
Hmm.
because the ministry is not a preaching ministry.
Right.
It
Okay.
is a minister of, um, you minister wherever, in loving, wherever
Hmm.
you are, irrespective of race, color, creed, circumstance, or you think there's one more,
I think it's environment. Yeah.
environment.
Okay.
So my
And
understanding of that over a period of years
mhm,
was if I worked on myself and changing negative attitudes and changing how I do judgment so I get rid of judgment, because my understanding is that judgment
mm,
blocks the process, the inner process of loving, being able to love.
mhm.
So I began working on that.
Well, what happens if you have a judgment? How do you either get back to the
So,
loving or
okay, the first thing is I stay really aware of myself and in the moment. A
Mhm.
judgment will come up in the moment. So what do I do with that judgment? Now I'm in judgment, not really connected to my authentic self.
Yeah.
I practice forgiveness all the time. If I have a judgment,
Mhm.
I look at that judgment, I face it, and I I do a forgiveness process, because judgment in my conditioning is pretty prevalent.
Mm,
I've been conditioned
right.
that way. So I remove myself from the judgment into forgiveness. And then I take that judgment energy, which is very strong,
Mhm. Can be, yeah, I
and
understand.
I replace it with either
Okay.
an affirmation, or loving.
You're loving. What kind of affirmation might you use? Do you have any that come to mind?
Well, it's according to how the judgment is.
Ah, okay. Be
Now,
specific to
so-
what's happening.
many times the judgment is against myself.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's typical for a lot of us.
Yeah, such as you're not worthy,
Hmm.
you're not lovable, um, you're stupid,
Hmm.
another thing. So I take it, an affirmation like this: Angela, you are so loving.
Hmm. And you are.
You are so beautiful. You are so radiant. And that would be my affirmation for that judgment.
Right, right. So you actually, you actually meet it where it is rather
Yes,
than
I
thinking,
made it where it is, and for that judgment. And then I stay vigilant.
yeah, that's what I was aware of. It's like a lot of people, I think, may have the same experience you're doing, but unless we stay vigilant, we don't even aware that we're being critical or having againstness towards something. I have a little bit different technique, but it's the same. I think that vigilance is what's important because that energy of like againstness that judgment can have really affects us more than it affects even other people,
Yeah.
right? It's part of, you're talking about healing, that the loving and that openness is what allows the spiritual energy to flow and, lighten our bodies. And I always think if I have a judgment, though, there's something I have as a vision of something better or different, right? That it could be. And if I look at that, if I do a judgment, I'm just putting againstness towards what is. Well, I'm not going to change what is, right?
Yeah.
But I can look at that vision and say, okay, I can put my energy into that. If I want more peace in the world, if I want more loving in my relationship, if I want more health in my body, let me keep a vision of the health, of the peace, right? Not focusing on the negative, which is hitting against something that we can't change. It's kind of an Aikido move,
Yeah.
put it into what we want, which just sounds like how you use an affirmation, that you just transform that energy and redirect it in a way that serves you.
Well, at this time in my life,
Yeah.
um, my intention is to leave this world clear,
Hmm.
loving.
Right.
That's my intention. So almost everything that I'm doing is a journey of self-discovery,
Still, which is what is so wonderful.
right? So my I have more importance on self-discovery than
Okay.
I do on world healing at this point.
Okay.
My time is more spent in self-discovery, self-healing, self-awareness,
Hmm.
and self-centered.
And in
But
that,
I'm old.
well, and what I'm aware of, and one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you is I'm aware that even in your late 80s, you did a program that's a Doctor of Spiritual Science at Peace Theological Seminary, where we share that. We're both graduates of that. And if that, for most people, that would sound very ambitious. Like, why are you starting a doctorate when you're in your late 80s? And it's also just very inspiring. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about what that was for you and how you decided to do that. And it sounds like it may have to do with the self-awareness focus that you're talking about.
Well, I looked at this program, a doctorate. First of all, I was born in the Great American Depression.
Yeah.
And in my family, education was not a priority. Uh, Survival was.
Yeah. Okay.
So, over the course of my life, I had many, many responsibilities. I had two children, and I was a single mother.
Mm.
I had to survive in New York City,
Yeah. I
in
know that's
New
why
York
I was there.
City, and what, you know,
Right.
so I had all of these other priorities. And
Right.
finally, at 88, my rent was taken care of. I have Social Security.
Hmm.
So I had none of these other responsibilities. I said, my God, what an opportunity to get educated
Hmm. What a way to use that
and
freedom.
to use.
Yeah.
My time became very valuable.
Right.
Um, and for me, the program that I chose to do, because I'm not an academic,
Hmm. Whatever that means.
whatever that means.
Two doctorates, and I don't see myself that way.
I don't learn with an extremely mental approach, but I do learn from a heartfelt approach.
Okay.
Wow, I really learn from if you give me a heartfelt approach, I will go 100%.
Well, what does that mean to you? What's the difference? That's a really important thing to explore here, I think.
The most important thing to explore is what is it? I was born with a little seed of loving.
Hmm.
It's a seed.
I think we all have that
We
sense.
all have that.
Right.
Everyone has a seed of loving. And then God gave us that seed the way God gave us life.
Hmm.
Said, do with it what you will.
Okay.
Gave us the breath of life
Yeah.
and said, now do with it what you will. So I became aware at some time that it was up to me to water that seed so that it blossomed.
Hmm.
So I began to become aware of things to do that awakened that seed more. And
Right.
one of them, early early on, was service.
Yeah. And what do you mean by service?
To do something for someone without any expectation at all
Okay.
of being reimbursed,
Mm.
had nothing to do with charging money,
Mm.
nothing like that, just unconditional service.
Right.
And I found that when I did that, my loving expanded, got greater inside of me. And that's what I was looking for, by the way.
Hmm. Hmm. Is that kind of method or something you could find?
Something that, and what I could learn. And that was my primary learning,
Right.
was to put myself in a position of being of service,
Right. Wow.
irrespective of race, color,
Right.
environment.
Well, and that's such a good point, Angela, because, I want to do an episode on higher perspective on relationships. But, a lot of the mythology, I think, in our culture also is that we love because of what's outside of us, something we like, we approve of, we appreciate, and then we can bring forward our loving, that our loving is dependent on what happens or who it is or how they are. And what you're really saying is that you're taking responsibility, that from a higher perspective of a soul, it's your responsibility, like you said, to grow that loving, not depend on anything outside of you, right? It's your choice, your soul's wanting to express the loving of who you are as a soul, a divine being. And, at this age, I know that, you have issues you deal with on the physical. You have friends and other people that serve you, that take you, we've talked about this, appointments, help out with stuff. But even at this age, I know that service is also something that you continue to do, that
Yes.
I mean, it may be spontaneous during your day, but I know that you've joined the prayer call that I host on a regular basis. And I think until very recently, as you mentioned, you were involved in this prison project where you would volunteer. And, tell us more about how that service expanded your loving, especially in the maximum security prison, working with women and sharing.
Oh my God. That service was a calling.
Mm-hmm.
I was called from a greater part of me, wherever that is,
Okay.
to when they said they were looking for volunteers to go into the prison to do a workshop, my hand shot up.
Just went up, right? It wasn't a mental thing, huh?
It just went up. I didn't put it up.
Okay.
It just went up. So,
And when you went to the prison, how did you experience? I mean, that's not an environment most of us are really used to or comfortable.
well, I guess you could call it a higher power. I call it the consciousness of Christ,
Uh-huh.
or the consciousness of love.
Of love. Yeah.
Love.
Whatever you want to call it, it's that loving kind.
Whatever you want to call it,
Right.
it's the same thing.
Right.
Surrounded me. I found all of a sudden I was happy.
Right.
Really, really. When I talk about happy, I'm talking about inward soul happy,
Mm.
happiness that doesn't really require getting a gift or having a birthday party. It's an inner happiness,
Right.
or maybe you could call it joy.
Yeah. We've got about 1 minute. We're going to have to wrap up. I'm wondering if there's just one thing from all the wisdom you've shared that you might share with people that would be your advice to keep your life becoming better and better.
Find a spiritual directive
Mm-hmm.
and practice every day that directive.
Got it.
Keep a good attitude.
Okay.
Keep an attitude of awareness, of acceptance, what is, and cooperate with it, and then live it.
That's beautiful.
Don't just have it as words.
Right. Embody it. Yes.
Embodiment. Yes.
So we're going to wrap up this episode, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I hope that if you want to, in Angela's bio in the show, you can see her whole presentation of her treatise for being a spiritual scientist. You can contact me for a free 15-minute consult, or for seniors, write me and say senior 50, and you'll get 50% off of a counseling or coaching session. And we're just going to end the program once again just by centering in our loving. Put your hand on your heart. Imagine your divine, peaceful, loving essence within you. Get in touch with that. And now this time we're just going to send that loving energy, that light of who we are, out to spirit, God, the universe, however you see that, for it to be used for the greater good, for the highest good of all concerned, your contribution to what is possible on this planet. We hope to see you next time, and God bless you all. Peace. You have been listening to Soul Musings, exploring and embracing higher perspectives with me, Dr. Connie. Tune in every second Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific to learn how to use every experience for spiritual expansion and how to create the essence of the experience you want instead of the form. Learn about ways of living and working together that help build a more loving and cooperative world. Visit soulmusings.org to see more about what I offer and to book a 15-minute free consult.